Today's topics will kind of help cover the managed methods kind of key platform elements related to the risk scanning, the policies, and the alerts, and then as well as going over exclusions. The exclusion topic is added in here because it relates closely to those risks and policies and helps kind of tune out any unwanted noise or things that are reaching end users or blocking kind of day-to-day actions there. So with that being said, there will be a Q&A segment followed up here. Again, depending on the chat accessibility, you guys can feel free to type in the chat here, or if you feel more comfortable, just send an email to support@managedmethods.com. So with that being said, I'll go ahead and get my screen shared. We'll dive into the live demo and get started today. All right, so we should see the new screen share here on the Managed Methods platform. Again, quick overview. We'll start kind of diving into the risks, followed up by the policies and how those relate to risks, and then kind of end the demo session by reviewing exclusions and letting you know how to kind of clean up unwanted noise there from the exclusion level. There'll be some other parts that we touch on here today. So if at the end of the meeting you guys want to get more insight or more in-depth insight on any of the portions that we touched on, again, support@managedmethods.com is a great resource to kind of go over and get some additional help. So as I mentioned, we will start on the risk portion. So let's go ahead and dive into the risk section. So I keep mentioning the two things between risks and policies. So we like to kind of present the risk as being the actionable, the active side of the platform, whereas the policies are more the reactive side of the platform. So let me show you what I mean by this. From our admin section, which is in our new waffle menu, you can get to the risk details. By default, there will be risks here that have been built out when the platform was released. You can definitely feel free to go through any of these, make changes, enable, disable based on your end goals. Likewise, if some of these don't make sense to kind of what your district is looking to get alerts for, feel free to go ahead and delete those and resolve any of kind of the additional noise within these sections. But for today's examples, kind of what I'll dive into is how to leverage risks, the policies, and again, how to kind of reduce any noise in the platform so that you feel like the results that are being flagged are things that are actionable and not just things that you had to go in day by day and say, okay, this wasn't anything that I actually need to take action on, and it kind of wasted my time. So in that event, there is the default risks that I was just showing you, but there's also availability to create your own custom risks. And the reason I want to bring up the custom risk, one, to give you guys visibility that you can create something beyond just our default setup there. And two, it gives you kind of good insight into how to start kind of from a broad risk scan and then start to hone in again to kind of get into the actionable items and weed out the things that are more noise for you. So in the risk scans, the best way again to think of it is that these are going to be the active side of the platform. So conditions that you add into this definition is going to be scanning these available sources. These will be things like drive files, email, attachments, so on and so forth. To kind of stay at the high level, you can see it's kind of super broad and say, okay, we've had specific events that have been reported to us by counselors, principals, whatever it may be. In these cases, let's say that there's been an uptick in VPN usage or people are using proxies and they're using these in kind of inappropriate ways to let's say get AI responses for education assignments, things along those lines. Just getting around firewalls to play games during class time, watch videos, so on and so forth. So again, don't want to overwhelm yourself with all the fields that you do see here. You can start very broad and say, okay, we've had a spike in VPN and proxy kind of activity. So from an admin perspective, you can start to tell the platform, hey, I want to be alerted, or sorry, not alerted. Hey, I want to flag anything that starts to find these sorts of keywords in the context. Now, you'll also notice there's other sections here that kind of get more in depth, such things as context, the risk regex, and as well as which SaaS this risk is going to be connected with. So very simple risk setup right here currently. We're looking for specific keywords that are going to be VPN or proxy. Now I can take it one step forward here and say, hey, I don't care if staff are talking about these sorts of topics, but it's really what we want to hone into is students. Now, some people might not have filtered views set up on their environment currently. To give you kind of quick visibility into that, what you'll notice is that in our demo environment, we do have two filtered views here. One is split from staff and the other is split for students. So you can already see where the pros kind of lead into having a split environment where everyone's not just nested under one bucket. And in these events, you can simply go through and come back and apply these specific risk scans. And I just realized I was on a tab share, so you might not have seen my example. So let me go back to the main homepage. And what I was highlighting here is that you'll notice there is the staff and students breakout for our Google environment, which again allows us to more hone in specific risks related to things that we don't want to be flagged on if staff are chatting about it. So in this case, let's just say we've just created this specific risk. What's going to happen next is from the actual platform creation, since we did apply it on just students and we're simply looking for 2 keywords, what you would expect to see as this move forward is the platform scanning those sources and flagging the risks. So from the actual platform visibility and views, there is a risk tab here. The risk tab is going to be consistent of all of those risks that are activated within your platform, whether those are the default risks or a custom one that like we just created. And in this case, the most important thing to think about is when you have a new risk that's created or a new risk that's enabled, start to think if the results that the Managed Methods platform is showing you is something that's actionable, or it's something again that's you reviewed, makes sense, and it's not something that you need to move forward with. So we want to reduce the noise in these sections so that the results that you guys are getting are actionable and kind of are streamlining your workflow, not feeling like you're coming in and feeling overwhelmed with all the results and you check 10 of them and only 5 of them are things you need to take action on. With that being said, if you do come through the results section, you start to say, okay, I have a new risk that was enabled. It's starting to flag much more results than I expected it. There are quick actions you can take to kind of clean up the summary section, and that would simply be this ignore risk. So the ignore risk action itself is really just saying to the platform, hey, I've reviewed this risk. It's something that I don't need to move forward with and shouldn't be flagged kind of in the upcoming events. So again, you'll get a quick indication, of what risk was flagged. So in this case, self-harm risk. When these risks come up based on those definitions, you can get the quick identifiers as to why it was flagged. So we can see here, mentions of self-harm. And in those cases, again, if something is actionable, that's a great end case for the risk scan itself. However, we will notice that the kind of more often than not, especially around custom risk scans, is that this will start to become more noisy than actionable. So you're kind of starting to weed through, and maybe some of the actionable results are getting pushed on to second pages. So with that being said, there are ways to tune these risks. So if you do deploy something and it starts to be actionable, don't feel overwhelmed and say, hey, this just isn't going to work. You can always come back to these custom risk sets and make your specific changes. So in our cases, let's say that we have these 2 keywords. I'm starting to get 50 flags a day. Good news is 10 of them are actionable from students saying that they've worked around the proxy or the VPN at the district. But there might be cases on the other portion where these keywords are expected to come in, whether people are signed up to specific email services that kind of have these specific mentions in their discussions, or if somebody in the district, admins, ITs are also messing around with VPNs or proxies, they may mention those sorts of things in documents, emails, things like that. So in the event that you're seeing flags and patterns come up, that you say, hey, I've noticed this pattern, it's a flag, but it's not something that's actionable to me, you can come in here and put accepted keywords. And what this will do is look for specific strings. So in this case, if you have an IT member named Dave and he does VPN reports for a specific use case, and for whatever reason this platform's just starting, or our platform's just starting to flag those risks, and again they're not actionable to you. So you can come in here, find those patterns, say, okay, anytime Dave's VPN report comes up, I don't want that to scan. But if users are using those general keywords around VPNs or proxies, we want that to flag. Now you can take this one step further, and this context field is definitely a great place to start here. So the keywords and context will work in combination with each other, meaning that if somebody mentions the words VPN, right now it's currently just going to get flagged. However, again, we really want to make sure that the platform is tuned and actionable for you guys and not just flagging results that have these keywords and phrases. So with that being said, you can add context to kind of hone in on what's going on with the VPN. So let's say somebody said, they're using or found or sharing. These are the types of things that you can add in to kind of more hone in on your risk scan. So it doesn't just have to cast a wide net and flag a bunch of noise. You can add context, allowed words, and even context check length, risk matches count. It gets pretty deep in here. So if at any point in time you guys do create a custom risk and it just starts to seem more noisy, but it is capturing some of the events you want, again, don't hesitate to reach out to support@managedmethods.com. We're here and always happy to kind of go over those examples, see what patterns we can find, and then give you guys some good insights as to, what fields you can apply here to more hone in and tune this risk so that things that are getting flagged are going to be appropriate content. So you'll notice that there's plenty of ways to go in kind of creating a risk, whether it's keyword related or risk regex related. Just as a quick bit on the regex end, great use for kind of finding things that are relating to patterns. So if you're looking for people's specific birthdays that are being shared, or maybe a set of ID numbers, maybe relating to HR or billing, if those things are coming up in your environment or being shared outside the domain, you can add risk regex to find certain patterns based on those unique identifiers. So it doesn't have to just be specific keywords or sentences, things like that. So now that we have gone over the risk section there, just from the specific definitions, we'll notice again from the risk tab, there is plenty of details to kind of review based on the risk results. However, there also are cases where risks come up where they're not flagged by the platform yet, but they've been reported to you by internal members or employees. So with that being said, it's great that our platform will show you things that are active and currently being flagged and finding things of concern. However, to the second point there, if somebody reports to you, hey, there's been a student that keeps mentioning, a specific subject or a topic, or even, specific words or phrases that we want to keep our eyes out for, there is a second portion to the platform beyond just its general scanning and summary, and that's going to be the live file search as well as a live email search. So both of these sections, what's going to let you do is make a real-time call to your domain and make a search of things that are happening here. So if a counselor has reported that somebody has used, some inappropriate words or, maybe some abbreviations of inappropriate words, you can go ahead and look for that specific case in any existing files or emails. When those are found, what that does is really opens up the doors to say, okay, here's other words or patterns that are used within these documents and contents. And maybe those are the things we want to also add to these risk scans. So good news is, we have risks that are going to flag and give you details, currently, but there also are those events where things, occur that aren't accounted for in the risk scan, and you kind of need to dig up that detail to generate a good and kind of performant risk. So the live searches on both Gmail and Drive files are great resources to kind of dig up things that aren't necessarily flagged in the platform currently, but you do want to move forward, get insight into them, and flag them. The next portion to this, we're going to dive into the connection between the risks that we've gone over and the policies themselves. Reason we like to connect these two in reference is because they are close as they reference each other. A policy violation can look for a specific risk scan. However, there's a lot of other details related to a policy violation that you can set up for specific alerting and things along that line. So as you'll notice, we'll kind of transition from the admin section where we found the risks to the specific policies themselves. Some people, like I had mentioned, might have just a singular group here, just a full bucket. Other people might have their environment split out like staff and students. Again, another big benefit of having staff and students split, or however you guys find to be most beneficial, is you can set specific policies related to the staff or students again. So in most cases, students probably have more rule sets over them compared to the staff, where staff might be dealing with specific, documents or events where these risks are being talked about. Whereas students, you more so want to be reactive and make sure that, either you're mitigating unexpected behavior or taking place and kind of making automated actions to resolve any sort of suspicious activity within the domain itself. So you'll notice within this policy section, there are plenty of things to kind of digest. However, again, we kind of want to keep everything very simple here. So you can keep it standard by looking at the additional adding a policy. And as I was mentioning, the way that these connect from the risk portion to the policies is looking at that specific condition. So if at any point in time you create a specific risk scan, let's say we use our birthday risk scan, which is using a regex pattern to look for birthdays, we can go ahead and say, hey, anytime this goes ahead and finds a risk, or sorry, the risk violation relating to birthday scans, we can trigger a specific event. So for today, we'll do an example. And you'll notice that you can go specific sources. So we'll do some drive files and emails. And this gets really into the weeds. You can get really granular as to what you apply here. But again, to make sure that things aren't overwhelming for you guys as the end users, it's good to kind of start and cast these nets wide and then start to hone in. So if you did have examples that came up where, an exe file was coming up in the domain and you guys wanted to kind of get visibility on, users and shared drives that are receiving exe files or uploading exe files, you can create a super simple policy violation that's looking for just that file type itself. It gets also more complex here, but also very beneficial in directionality for sharing. So the sharing side of things allows you to have that directionality to more dictate, what's going to be the fire drill for alerts and policy violations. Reason being is, let's say, for example, there was, social security number or a uh, credit card number shared. Good news is when it's shared from within the organization, you still have action and availability to remove that end source from your users. However, when some of these risks reach your outside your domain and those external users, you kind of lose that admin availability to remove the content from the end user. So good news is our platform can give you indications if users are sharing sensitive information outside your domain. A lot of times, although we can't take actions to remove that detail that had been sent out, a lot of times it'll help curb kind of this behavior and give people kind of those indications that, hey, this probably wasn't the best case that I sent that, and kind of, moving forward, changes how they start to do their sharing. You can even get more granular here by just looking for specific users or OUs. This comes into handy if you're using a Gmail service, and for whatever reason your staff continue to get unwanted emails. You could quickly come into here, add a domain name, a specific user that the email is coming through, and apply those specific contexts from the rule sets. So to tie all that together, as you kind of add your rules based on your end goal, the policies themselves by default aren't going to be taking any actions. What it's going to do is alert the admins of the platform. So you'll notice at the top of your policy section, you'll have an email field. This email field at the very top is going to be a 4-hour window that gets batched together and sent based on all of the policy violations in that time frame. However, there are obviously lots of cases where, if this specific policy is triggered, you want somebody to take a look immediately. So there is the availability to not just kind of get this rolling time window, but you can send out these alerts to users that can, get more investigative standpoints right off the bat. So you can certainly add specific users in here as comma separated values. And then likewise, if at any point in time, you do say, hey, my risk scan has been working performance, or my risk scan has been performant. It's working how I expect it to. There's not really much false positives. You can start to get that comfortability to say, okay, maybe instead of me having to come in every time there's an alert and I take the manual action to revoke a share or delete a file, I want the platform to start taking that automation for me. So you can create automations as far as the remediation states here. And when these events come up, let's say that's our custom risk scan was found within a drive file or an email, we can tell the platform that when this policy is found, let's go ahead and delete this email or remove any of those shares that were added to it. Emails also has the same kind of sets of actions you can take, but more importantly, again, to kind of mitigate user behavior and alerting moving forward for admins, the on remediation gives users good indication that one, maybe they've done something that contains content that shouldn't be shared externally. Or again, maybe it's just something that's inappropriate in nature and you want to delete it from the student's drive, whatever it may be. So you can notify the admin that something has been identified and there has been an action taken, as well as your admin itself. So the notify admin, especially in the case for malware, is a great kind of sanity case, because you can get the notification that the malware was identified by the platform, but you'll also get a follow-up notification that the malware was deleted. So those two alerts should give you the sanity to not have to go to the platform, but simply the platform tells you that, hey, these things have come up, we've resolved it, and here's kind of the evidence related to that. The second portion to the alerts themselves, especially to kind of curb users' behavior, is the on remediation. So you can add custom messages to each one of the policies themselves. This oftentimes will help, especially if, again, somebody shares their social security number to an external domain. This especially happens to be increasing during tax time and season when people are sharing documents back and forth to their personal accounts and their district accounts. So those are good ways to highlight and give end users kind of the indication that, hey, we found something concerning. And you can also add kind of a note in here to give it more of a personal feel coming from your IT team that maybe these are the sorts of things you should keep an eye on, or likewise, if this event has occurred, you should take X, Y, and Z action here. However, you'll notice that that's kind of just a very simple warning message in general. You might be wondering, what are the warning messages look like, from an end user perspective? So in the admin section, beyond just creating beyond just creating the policy and applying certain warning messages, there are email templates you can go ahead and edit. And this gives you, again, kind of that look and feel from the end user that this isn't coming from just some random managed methods service. This is coming, from the district that's monitored by the IT admins, so on and so forth. So you'll notice in this general customization email, which is followed into our admin section, you have the ability to change those general template details as well as the individual actions. So like we were saying, if there's going to be a warning sent to the end user because they've sent, sensitive content, you can preview these and quickly see that, okay, when end users are receiving these warnings, they do have a very generic managed methods branding alert here. So sometimes users will kind of just, push that behind or on the back burner. Whereas if you do update this custom warning message section to have, your own district logo, details relating back to any of, your internal support services or admin services there, and things along those lines. So did want to highlight that, behind the scenes in this admin section, there is availability to edit those customization templates for warnings that users receive, as well as per policy, you can set up, specific warnings to give users those indications that, hey, this has been found and this is coming, from your IT department. So I know I've been kind of rolling through this fairly quickly, but did want to take the quick step back and just kind of reiterate what we've gone over here to make sure things all make sense. We started out on this admin portion going over the risk section, which again gives you the access to create, edit any of these risks. If you do create a risk and you notice that it's just more overwhelming and noisy, you can come back in and always edit any of the further fields to kind of hone in and kind of check what's actionable and remove that noise. And then once that's said and done, the platform will start scanning for those specific conditions that you've had. And you can make kind of that second step to say, when these specific risk scans come up, I also want to be, alerted that, these things are being found, as well as maybe take a further step and say, when these come up, I want specific actions to be taken, or in examples, specific administrators to be alerted here. So the next portion we'd like to point out here kind of in that mix is the policy section. So much like the risks, once you create a risk itself, it will all boil into the risk fields. Whereas the policies, after you create the policy, also have its own tab and it boils into its own summary section. So any policies that come up moving forward, you do have historical tracking of, what went on, the source in general, the policies that the source had gone ahead and triggered and kind of matched the conditions, and then so on and so forth. So if you guys had any remediation set up, you would see a remediation action in the state. However, it does come up where you see these grayed out actions at the top, and you may ask yourself, what do these actions do? Because I don't have any, availability to click them, even if I select a specific source. So it is important to note that you don't have to just apply an immediate action right off the bat. You can go ahead and set delayed actions here for your policies. In the event that, let's say that there was something that came through that was, explicit in nature, you didn't have time to review the detail yet. But let's say, if you don't have the time and you're busy, that after, 24 hours, you want to make sure that that file is deleted or whatever it may be. So there are ways to, from this remediation section, to set those delayed remediation statuses. And if those are ever set, what you would notice back in that policies section is that you would have availability to either say, hey, I've reviewed this, let's go ahead and just immediately remediate this, or go ahead and stop the remediation because it wasn't something that needs to be actionable. So did want to highlight that there are 2 actions related to the policy violations. However, they're typically not found in the general use cases, as we'll see that most people set up their policies to trigger those actions immediately. The final portions to kind of dive in here to connect all of the topics that we covered between the alerts on the risks, the policies, are more related to the exclusions. So exclusions themselves are going to help you guys avoid any unwanted interruptions between users' just day-to-day activity. With that being said, there are cases where you may set up a specific risk scan that's looking for sensitive wording or nature, or at the end of the day, there are social security numbers or credit card numbers that are being shared to and from users. With that being said, there are certain cases where you have individuals or file names that contain those certain concerns. So from the view section, there is a configure in the top right for an option to get into exclusions. And what this does is also helps you kind of reduce noise or unwanted actions in the platform to alleviate anyone within, let's say HR or counselors who again are dealing with these sorts of events, and they might not be the one actually providing the strings of toxicity or profanity in general, but they might be reporting that report to another superintendent, whatever it may be. So to ensure that the platform isn't getting in their way of sharing those details, you can come into the exclusion section, and there's plenty of ways to go about setting these. One, you can go and say, okay, we have a specific HR user that deals with self-harm events, things along those lines, and you can specifically input them to avoid them from getting triggered from policies and the actions. The second portion to this would be more of a file in question. Let's say that you guys did have a file that contained reports related to toxicity, racial remarks, usage of just whatever risks that have been flagged. But it is a document that's held by, your internal users as, a teacher in historical reporting, and less so the original file that the user should be concerned about. So in those events, you can come through from a file perspective and just say, okay, we have a specific file name that, deals with racial events, whatever it may be. And these fields will contain plenty of ways to go about applying things. So, if there's something that's racial events and then a wildcard at the end, you can apply a star. And what this would do is allow you to capture any file name that starts with racial events, and then after it can have whatever it needs. So, if it's followed up by dates, you can make sure that, that doesn't interfere with anything. So lots of ways, again, to go from the platform's kind of starting standpoint to say, okay, we want something to be scanned. I want those scans to flag the results. Based on those results, are they, one, overwhelming and not really giving me the actionable things I need, and do things need to be tuned? Or two, have these risk scans been performant and I want them to start alerting end users and or taking actions for me when they're found? So I know I've connected a few different portions of the platform, but those are good places to kind of really highlight to make sure that you feel comfortable, one, with creating risk scans. Again, you don't have to get overwhelmed with all the initial fields that you need here. Simply applying the fields that are relevant will start by giving you kind of that insight. Okay, what are we going to see when these start to get flagged? You can evaluate those risks, see what patterns are unactionable for you, and then come back to the risk scan and kind of weed out those needs there. So it's a great a starting point, but you may notice that there is a little bit more work up front after you apply it. Again, never hesitate to reach out to support@managedmethods.com. I know you guys are always busy, so we're here and always happy to provide any insights and examples on things that you can change to make sure that your platform is more performant. So once those risks are applied, again, you can kind of make the decision if you want your end users to start being alerted based on those policy setups. I'll also point out that you don't need to combine risks and policies each time. You can simply look at, for example, phishing concerns and say, hey, I just want to look for the sources of emails, use the managed methods phishing scan, and apply it just like that. So very short and sweet, and gives you simple and good coverage. So again, don't want you to feel overwhelmed by all the fields that you can input, but really take those steps back and say, what are the patterns that are persisting? What things do we care about? What don't we care about? And moving forward from there. So hopefully at least these three sections that we covered here today gives you some comfort to go in here, maybe create some things just to see what flags. By default, it's just going to be sending alerts. So there's not going to be any interruption to the end user's files unless you apply some sort of remediation state. So a great way to start testing, especially during maybe the downtimes of the summer, to say, okay, we have specific keywords that we do want to start identifying, but I don't want to start feeling overwhelmed and getting, hundreds of alerts from the managed methods platform that starts to, burn up my time from a day-to-day standpoint. So again, our end goal from the platform is to make sure that one, it's meeting the risks and conditions you guys need as a district. And two, when those are being flagged, that it's not flagging unactionable items or false positives. And the things that are being flagged and you want to alert your end users on are going to be things that help you guys mitigate any safety, user concerns, and or kind of give evidence as far as concerning policy alerts.